I love this art style. I think this is just so gorgeous and creative and inspiring of creativity. Hey there, this is Ina from Taproot Tarot, and I wanted to hop on real quick and tell you about this deck I found that, as far as I can tell, hasn't been talked about in anywhere but in Italy, and only seems to be available in Italy right now. It's a Tarocchi by Michelangelo Rossato, and it is based on a book also by the same author called La Favola dei Tarocchi, or A Tarot Tale, and all of the images for the cards come from this book. So the book was the initial project, and it appears to be a story about the Fool and the Fool's journey and meeting all of the different characters of the tarot, which is pretty cool. And all of the images in this tarot deck came directly from that book. And it is an absolute delight. I wish I could remember how I stumbled across it. I cannot, because whenever I found it, I waited a little bit of time to make sure it was in my budget. It's not an expensive deck. It's mass market. It is, like I said, only available in Italy though. So if you're in the US like I am, the shipping will be a little pricey, but even with like 20 bucks or more in shipping, I think I paid, 50 bucks for it. So it's not a super expensive deck, but it is absolutely lovely, and I'm so excited to share it with you. It is a modern Tarocchi, which is based on a few different traditions and has a little bit of esoteric symbolism here and there, but nothing too heavy-handed. And the guidebook really emphasizes an open reading, but also gives meanings for the triumphs. So it's a really cool deck. The artist has illustrated a number of books, and his work is really beautiful. I just really love this deck. So let's take a look at it. It's got a magnetic closure. This is the back design. And I will try to do a proper walkthrough here because I've only found Italian language videos on this so far. It has a pretty nice book that is all in Italian. And I'll talk about it in more detail after we check out the cards. It has a little bit of a ribbon to get these out. The inside is actually pretty sturdy. The cards are 13.2 centimeters tall and 7 centimeters wide. Really nice cardstock. It's matte and soft. I wouldn't go so far as to call it rose petal, but nice and soft. Flexible, not too thick, not super thin. It has a really nice satiny gilding. It's not plasticky or anything like that, and they slide really nicely. There's maybe a little bit of stickiness, as you can see. So let's first do a walkthrough. The Fool has feathers like the Visconti Fool does, which is kind of a neat reference. And one of their bells fell on the path, like he's leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. The Magician has a more modern take, with distinct representations of the 4 suits. But still the traditional little flower here. And it looks like the images are somewhat cut off. You can see the full image of La Papessa includes her feet and the dogs, as well as some implements here. And those aren't included in the deck. So that makes me tempted to buy the book now, even though it's in Italian and it will be difficult to read. You can see a larger version of her book, or her robe's actually turning into the cover of a book. That's pretty cool. And like I said, a little bit of esotericism. The Empress. And there are elements that it's hard to tell what they are, so they are maybe cut off a little bit from the larger image in the book. but gorgeous nonetheless. The Emperor, he has a griffin buddy next to him. And I like how the backgrounds do match the theme of the card. So the Empress has fertile fields behind her, whereas the Emperor has very structured, right-angled, solid building. The Pope. If you look closely, the supplicants have garlic and chili. And there appears to be something going on here, but it's hard to tell what in the card. The Lover. Really beautiful botanical choices throughout this deck. This Chariot card is pretty cool. So not only are the horses two different colors, which they often are, but everybody's eyes are two different colors. Everyone has a brown right eye on their right and a blue left eye on their left. And the charioteer appears to be non-binary or feminine. And it says MR for Michelangelo Rossato. I love this art style. I think this is just so gorgeous and creative and inspiring of creativity. This Justice is amazing. The lighting effect is really powerful. And her cloak has a maze in it, and if you look very closely, you can see some figures in the maze. It's hard to tell what those figures are. Possibly ghostly. And this gorgeous lighting coming through the doorway, which lights up her face. Such a dramatic hermit with just a starkly dark background, with his weathered face lit by his lantern, his fingernails overgrown. What a sweet face he has. There's a lot going on in this Wheel of Fortune. Love these creature choices. They're pretty cool. And then we have Fortune blindfolded, like she often is. But the Wheel of Fortune itself is balancing on two boats in a rocky sea. This poor buddy lost their crown on the way down. And then we have a little scene in here, which probably has more context in the book. Strength card has some onlookers, which again probably is continued as a larger image in the book. I love the detail of the lion's claws and her bare foot. Really gorgeous card. I love this Hanged Man. The fact that he's hung over a gulch that appears to be steep and fathomless makes it much more dramatic. He's also hanging from a very thin pole which looks like it could give out. And yet, he has a pretty serene look on his face. It looks like he's got maybe some smudging on his tunic. And there are possible images to be seen in the greenery. That looks like it could be a face. And here's a hand. A nice colorful death card with a bunch of creative touches. A couple of skeletal birds holding flowers. Really interesting face and skull with multicolored bones. Over here, you can see a cat skull. Yes, death comes for all of us. Some body parts. A skull with a clerical headpiece. And a gesture of a pope. There's a king with his crown. And it is numbered but unnamed. I love the kind of alien beauty of this Temperance card. Alien or maybe just celestial. The hairline reminds you of the fashion in the Sforza decks, or the Visconti decks, I should say, Sforza and Madrone. They would intentionally, a high forehead was considered beautiful, and they would intentionally shear their foreheads to give them a higher hairline. And Temperance appears to be replicating that fashion. Very cool background. The devil appears to have what looks to me like a baboon face on their torso. Eyes on the elbows. The knees are creatures that are breathing fire, which then turn into the devil's legs and feet. How cool is that? The imps appear to be having a fairly decent time, not too miserable. And there are some other creatures around as well. Really nice set of antlers on this devil. Really decorative lightning representation in the tower. This might be a water spout. Little Masonic reference over the door, which is bricked up. That's interesting. Maybe these folks had no other escape. A lot of checkered floors, which is traditional esoteric symbolism, which I think may have originated with Uda Picard. I think my dogs are being tormented by a squirrel on the back deck, so if you hear an upset dog, it's because the perimeter has been breached. Lovely star with a really interesting feature. The water she's pouring in turns into not just her reflection, but almost a 3D replica of her, or water-based replica of her. Really beautifully illustrated stars. I kind of love how he made this little ledge for her knee. That was very considerate. There's a movement in the lobster and also a little crab. Sometimes there is a crab instead of a lobster in this card, and this one has both. really love how he paints light. It is just gorgeous. Beautiful sun card. I was reading the translation of the guidebook, and he talks about every card having both a positive and potentially negative meaning, or a light and shadow in every card, and talking about the intensity of the sunlight. And here, the solar twins have nowhere to go to escape the sunlight, so it's gorgeous. Beautiful, joyous sunlight. And the solar twins appear in good spirits here. But if they do overheat, I suppose they can go into the water. But they don't have any shade trees. That has a neat effect, I think. They're in front of the traditional wall in the Marseille, but on this tiny little island in the water. Really gorgeous Judgment card. Her wings are amazing. Her headpiece has an eye and 2 ears on it. She has a trumpet, and you can see the sound coming from it. And then 2 other musicians are accompanying her. This person or being with a stringed instrument, and this person or being with a percussion instrument. And you can see the sound waves of all 3 instruments, making it down to the mortals below. Really gorgeous. And the world. Instead of the angel Matthew, we have this winged head being. And often the 4 evangelicals are associated with the 4 suits, and that's represented here. So the being in place of the angel Matthew does have a heart and is crying. Instead of an eagle, we have a more fantastical bird, which is associated with air. And I think maybe that's represented by the space in his abdomen. And this is John, by the way, the eagle. The lion Mark is fire. You can kind of see the fiery representation there. And the ox or bull Luke is earth. And this bull has earthen legs and head, and grassy or greenery on their body. Now, as a non-religious person, you might be wondering how I know all their names, and it's because my dad and his brothers are 3 of the 4, so I really only have to remember one. And a gorgeous figure in the center. A nice detail of these hands clasping and then standing. The esoteric symbol of the egg wrapped by a serpent. It's not the Ouroboros, because that's the serpent eating its tail, right? Or maybe this is. I can't remember. There's some stars down below. You all know I don't keep track of the esoteric stuff. I enjoy it, but I just can't remember it. It doesn't stick. She's holding her 2 wands, but these ones are lit. All right, so the pips are not as decorated as we would expect for such an ornate deck. You can see the Ace of Coins here is nicely decorated, but the rest of the coins are not. And at first when I saw that, I was a little disappointed. I do like some arabesques or something surrounding the pips. But then I thought, you know, this is an Italian deck, and a lot of the more modern Italian decks do have more plain pips like this. I did look it up in the book, With it translated, it says the minor arcana pay homage, in addition to the decks already mentioned, also to some Italian regional cards. Among the court figures are, in fact, knights, which are centaurs, and fantesses, so the feminine version of fante, as in the Minchiati Fiorentine, while the numerical cards are based in clarity and composition on the Sicilian Tarot, Neapolitan cards, and the Treviso cards. I've got a copy of the Tarocco Siciliano by Modiano, but I'm actually going to show you Nova Mundi's beautiful version, which is available on MPC. And these were what I was thinking of when I saw this deck. And this does start at 4 for the coins and 5 for the rest of the pips. But a lot of the modern Italian decks, as you can see, do have more plain coins or plain pips in general. So it's not uncommon. Now my suspicion is that since all of these images are based on what was in the book, they simply took these images, which I'm guessing are maybe decorative aspects of the book, and made them into pip cards without having to do additional art by the artist. Now, once I got these in person though, and could see this gorgeous parchment background, they didn't seem as plain anymore. So I'm still happy with them, even though they aren't very decorated. But I'll go through these pretty quickly. And the courts all represent different continents in kind of a stylized way, not super accurate, but in my view, fairly respectful. So the coins represent the Americas. The cups represent Africa. The swords represent Asia. And the batons represent Europe. As far as I can tell, that isn't written in the book specifically. And my guess is that in the book, the illustrated book that these cards were based on, my guess is that the Fool probably makes a journey around the world. And so we are then presented with a nice variety of families from around the world for the courts. So here we have the Fantessa of coins. The Cavalier of coins. And like it mentioned, like the Minchiati, the knights are centaurs. Queen of coins. And the King of coins. All of the aces are nicely decorated. This mirrors the tears that we saw in the world card. We have two distinct faces there. This is a nice touch. Michelangelo Rossato. Fantessa of Cups. The Knight of Cups. Queen of Cups. You can see it maintains really traditional images. This is normally a curtain or a banner of cloth curving over her. Here it seems to be more of a solid decorative structure, keeping a lot of the traditional shapes while adding more contemporary art, which I just think is gorgeous. And the King of Cups. And again, some tears. Or maybe rain. Ace of Swords. I don't know what the roosters are about, but I approve. I like them. All straight swords, which is traditional in Northern Italian decks. Contessa of Swords. And you can see the indication of air. The Knight of Swords. The Queen of Swords. And the King of Swords. A really beautiful Ace of Batons. All of the batons have a red center indicating fire, the main fuel of which is wood, according to the guidebook. Now these do have knobbly clubs for batons rather than the straight scepters, which is often called a Spanish pip style. Although if they are crossed, like in this one, that's considered Portuguese if they intersect. But this 3 of batons is the only one that intersects. Otherwise they are all, I think, modeled after a more Spanish style. Contessa of Batons, or Bastoni. And you can see the fire represented back here in these volcanoes. Here the volcano is progressing a bit. Some pretty great side eye on the Queen of Batons. These hexagonal bases are also found in the Visconti decks. There's another volcano there. And the King of Batons. He's got great hair. And it looks like the volcanoes have calmed down. They're maybe a little more stable. That's interesting. Or mature, I should say. That is the deck. It is a heavy, fairly thick deck. I imagine it's very flexible though. So I think it'll shuffle no problem. I'm going to want to explore it a little bit more, so I'm not going to shuffle it. Oh, what the heck. Let's shuffle it. Let's see how it goes. Ooh, it shuffles nice. It does bend a little bit when you shuffle, or maintain a little bit of bend, so it's one you would want to switch back and forth. It's a little bit on the long side for my hand size. I would probably shuffle a little better if I split it into two sections. It's a tiny bit sticky, but it's brand new. I think that'll wear in just fine. Let's check out this guidebook. You can see here a little bit more of the art in the Lover card. I'll read this quote here for you. If life is a card game, we are born without knowing the rules. Despite this, we are all called to play a hand. Are tarot cards just a game, or do they indicate a philosophy of life? Nikki de Sanfal. And we have a summary. Stories, games, and enchantments in the figures of the tarot. Peculiarities or features of this deck. Reading tarot, an inner journey. A little guide to the major arcana. A little guide to the minor arcana. And playing with tarot. So that's interesting. And it does include just some history. I put this through Google Translate, and just a little disclaimer there. These translator apps are amazing, but they can't translate, you know, poetry or metaphor or anything like that. So they can get a little bit dicey with things like the tarot and actually give you incorrect translations. This text does seem pretty straightforward as far as I can tell, and what I have found in the translation is kind of the usual summary of the history. And this is Tarot and its charm. One thing is certain, the tarot represents one of the most mysterious and complex systems of images handed down by humanity. An object of study by art historians and psychologists, it is not surprising that Freud was a well-known tarot player and that Jung's theory of archetypes was applied to their study. The fascination of these cards remains unchanged, or rather continues to grow with the passage of time. The tarot stimulates the imagination and fantasy. Italo Calvino, drawing them at random, wrote stories full of wonder. Many artists have reinterpreted them, distorted, and paid homage to, as in the case of the Tarot Garden in Capalbio, Tuscany, where Nikki de Sanfal built gigantic sculptures inspired by them. Many have wanted to give the tarot a rigid and unequivocal meaning, but they, as open symbols, are bearers of infinite meanings. After centuries, the tarot can be admired not only as a splendid collective work of art, but also as a magic mirror in which to reflect oneself. They can be contemplated for meditation, consulted as keys to decipher thoughts and feelings, or as a map to orient oneself in the present in constant becoming. Everyone is free to embark on a journey through the figures of the tarot, playing with their apparent lack of logic, and look at life with new eyes, interpreting it as a fairy tale, a book, or a question. Who am I? So he has a pretty cool take on the tarot. This is special features of this deck, and I've already read you the part about the minor arcana, or the pips and quartz. The major arcana are mainly based on the Tarot of Marseille, both in terms of composition and symbolic content. The colors and precious details are modeled on the Italian illuminated tarot. The numbering reflects the oddities and singularities of ancient decks, such as the wrong Roman numerals and the reversed 12 in the Hanged Man. I forgot to point that out. There are also unpublished peculiarities and secret details that enthusiasts will have fun identifying. These 22 cards are taken from the book La Favola dei Tarocchi by Michelangelo Rossato, 2025. And that is a tarot tale. So yeah, let's look at that really quick. And this happens, oh, I already shuffled them, didn't I? This happens sometimes. I think the Via Veal is one example where the Roman numerals are stamped separately from the images of the card and sometimes get reversed. Or in the case of the Hanged Man, sometimes people aren't familiar with how the imagery is supposed to go. So they actually reverse the card. So it's like he's balancing up on tippy toes. Or in the case of the Via Veal, the number is simply reversed. And some people think that means that, oh, in the Via Veal, my mistake, it's the Strength and Hermit that are reversed. So it looks like Strength is 9 and the Hermit is 11. But really, I think they're just reversed. Here he is. Okay, so you can see there is a backwards 12 on the Hanged Man. In case you saw that before and I forgot to point it out. And that's not a printing error. That is intentional. So this section is on layers of the tarot, cards as an inner journey. It just explains a little bit how to use them in an open reading style, really. And then it does give meanings for all the triumphs and points out different aspects of the cards. Here, for example, it says he's not looking where he walks. Here it explains that the Fool is also called La Mata Folle from the Latin folis, balloon, full of air, in reference to the empty, free head. It points out the three table legs, possible instability, which I always thought that concept was a little bit silly. It's just that one of the table legs isn't in scene. But we can read all sorts of things into it. This points out the throne book. This says, pouring water into the river is senseless gesture, artistic, act of liberation. The river flowing water is neither beginning nor destination. So just some nice associative thoughts to consider. If the chariot is used for traveling, the star guides the journey. This says this is both an ark and a tomb, body boundaries, narrowness of individual life. And underneath the judgment it says this is the last test. So it's got some nice meanings to look up, but then it talks about, it takes all of the triumphs through the journey, which I assume is represented in the storybook that these images are from. So you can kind of see them in sequence. When observing the major arcana in order, it is possible to perceive a non-random progression of images. In fact, they derive from a figurative repertoire that was very widespread in the Middle Ages. The first cards concerned the human condition, followed by choices, events, the precariousness of life, and the trials to be overcome with virtue, to finally rise to the universe and to the contemplation of greater things. Below are some of the author's notes, a personal interpretation of the arcana in sequence as many stages of an interior journey. And we begin with the Fool, travel or error, condition of absolute freedom, innate but forgotten. We all walk on lost paths. And then these are labeled as the four crowned heads, the noble faculties of each individual. The Popes is labeled as the practice of meditation. The Empress is the wonder of existence. The Emperor is the concreteness of reality. And the Pope is access to the sacred. So some pretty neat keywords there, and it takes you through all of the triumphs. And then it talks about the minors. So you can see it doesn't give meanings for each one. It gives these, it says the seeds, so as in the aces, and it gives you a meaning for each of the suits. And in this deck, it's the fairly standard earth, material, wealth, cups, emotions, air, thoughts, and batons, fire, and inspiration, and action. And gives meanings for each of the courts, not as individuals. So this meaning applies to all of the Fontessa cards. But then at the bottom, it gives a little bit more detail. They could represent the attitude of the apprentice who is learning, parentheses coins, shyness and emotional discovery, parentheses cups, youthfulness of thought, parentheses of swords, a great creativity yet to be channeled, parentheses wands. So as is often the case with pip decks, each individual card isn't interpreted, but you're given the aspects of the suits and the court or the number, and it's up to you to creatively blend those. So these are the numerical cards. In the oldest tarots, these 40 cards illustrate the numbers from 1 to 10 through geometric compositions of suits. Only in the 20th century did the fashion of adding characters to the drawings become widespread, making these cards more figurative and simplifying their interpretation. However, the original number cards bare and almost abstract have veiled symbolic implications. Numbers, in fact, are also archetypes. They often have a broad meaning, variable, based on the culture of reference. Below are some essential meanings of the 10 numerical degrees. The number could concern the concrete sphere if it is a card of pentacles or coins, that of emotion if of cups, of intellect if of swords, of creative intuition if of wands or batons. So this entry here isn't specific to the Ace of Cups, but to the aces in general. 1 or ace. It represents the beginning and the germination, the manifestation of something in a primordial and pure way. It is a number linked to the concept of origin, center, nucleus, symbol of individuality and uniqueness. So it goes through that for each individual one. These descriptions aren't for the suit pictured, but just for the number. And then it's up to you to combine that creatively with the relevant suit. And then we end with instructions on how to play the game, which is kind of cool. Before being studied as a wonderful collection of symbols, tarot was born in medieval Italy as a game of skill and luck, handed down for centuries in many variations. To play, all 78 cards of the deck are used, similar to Briscola. The triumphs are the strongest cards, those that triumph over the other suits. And then it goes into the rules of the game, in case you're interested and want to translate that. Or if you speak Italian. So that is the guidebook. It's pretty great. It, like I said, emphasizes open reading, although it does give some meanings based on, historical imagery, mythology, and symbolism. Like I said before, this is only available in Italy as far as I can tell. It is on Italian Amazon, but it's not on any of the other Amazons that I could see. I found mine on Abe Books. There was a used copy from a bookstore in Berlin, and that would have saved me quite a bit. It was used like new with much less expensive shipping, but it was a bookstore I've bought from in the past that I didn't have a perfect experience with. So I went ahead and spent a little more and got it from a bookstore in Italy through Abe Books. I really love it. It's a great deck. I think the artistry is just gorgeous. I love the respect that it has for tradition, while at the same time adding contemporary elements and taking artistic license that just makes for a really gorgeous deck. And now I'm pretty tempted to order the book now that I realize that the full images are probably more available in the book. Well, I am so excited to bring this to you. Thank you so much for joining me. I sure hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Thanks again, and I will talk to you next time.